Hello. So my name is Victoria Ward. I'm doing the Intro to Fiction Creative Project presentation, and it's it's cool. Let's get started. So my creative project is a compare and contrast between three books from a published imprint to several short stories we have read in class. The imprint is called Rick Riordan Presents. Riordan is the author of the Percy Jackson series and many others. Um, who he's partnered with Disney Hyperion Book Group to complete a simple goal. From Riordan himself, he states on the imprint's website, the goal of the imprint is to publish great middle grade authors from underrepresented cultures and backgrounds to let them tell their own stories inspired by the mythologies and folklore of their own heritage. The respective stories that I have chosen to analyze focus on Hindu, Korean, and West African mythologies. These books are The Dragon Pearl by Yoon Lee, Shah, and The End of Time by Roshani, Chokshi, and Tristan Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame, Mbalia. The PowerPoint presentation will be analyzing settings, conflicts, and themes in the primary and secondary sources. In preparation for this project, I had to remind myself of the stories we have read in class up to this point. I went back and studied the stories from Unit 1 since it was the first week of classes, and I've forgotten everything since then. I also had to read the first three books I mentioned in the first paragraph. Other materials I needed for this project, I needed my laptop to be properly working, PowerPoint to be downloaded onto my computer, and I needed to get the physical books um, so that I could read them and analyze them. I decided to create a PowerPoint presentation for this project because all semester I have been writing essay after essay after essay, so I wanted to work in a different medium while I had the chance. And the PowerPoint opens up with the same quotation from Rick Riordan that I had in the beginning of the video. Um, I started the project with the quotation in order to allow the information about the books to make more sense to their importance. I also included a slide to explain the main point of my project, which is to outline the similarities and differences of the longer novels from the imprint and the shorter stories from class. I did this to further explain my explanation that my analysis is important. Creating the PowerPoint took about a month to complete. I had to wait for materials at the library to arrive, and then I actually had to read them, which took about 3 days for each book. While I read, I took notes in a chart I created that separated the books and topics so I could easily transfer the information into the PowerPoint. Finally, I placed the information into the PowerPoint with the book from the imprints along with the information from the stories we read in class. Placing my notes about the books and short stories was one of the obstacles I ran into. I had an issue with trying to condense my notes on each book. I might have gotten a little carried away with taking notes. Other than the small issue, completing the project was pretty easy. Next, I wanted to mention why I specifically chose to use books from Rick Riordan's imprint. The selfish reason for wanting to do a project over these books is so that I could read them. I had been waiting to read more books from Riordan's imprint and learn more about other cultures and the stories they share. I also thought doing a project over books that not many people might know about would spike an interest in reading from more diverse authors. In my opinion, these books go into magical realism of fiction, and those inspired by Rick Riordan are the best books to read because you get engulfed as the reader into a fictional world mixed with others, and the fictional friends we meet on the way are the best. This is why I have chosen to pick these books. You should read the books I've used in the project from the Rick Riordan Presents imprint. I did not use a lot of pictures within this PowerPoint presentation. For the pictures I did use, there are the book covers for the three books I chose to compare and contrast with the short stories from class. The other books I used in the project is the logo from Riordan's imprint, which I used to border one of my slides. These photos are found in the beginning of my presentation, and unfortunately, the first 3 to 4 slides are the only slides that have these pictures where you can really see them. In order to help with easier clarification to which books being analyzed, I did place a small image of the book cover specific to each slide. Even though the number of pictures is small, the information I provide is sufficient to understand how the novels of the imprint and the short stories from class. The theoretical implications of my project are that even though the fictional stories we have read in class were shorter, they still contain the same elements as longer narratives do. Each of the main slides is split into 2 sections where one is pulling from one of the books and the other slide takes notes from a story you've read in class. Finally, there's a box that states the connection of both stories in the terms of setting, conflict, and theme. And I really think this is a good way to set up this sort of project so that you can clearly see, what's being compared. One's on one side, one's on the other, and then there's a connection to both of them. So it just kind of wraps up what's on the slide a little easier to understand. So next, as I worked on this project and after reading the books from the imprint, I realized how important it is to read fiction from the perspectives of people who are different than you. You've probably heard the phrase, walk in someone else's shoes, but have you heard the phrase, read someone else's story? Okay, so you might have heard this, but this is important. Reading books from diverse authors makes the reader more aware of how people of different cultures view the world. Hopefully, by giving this presentation to the class, you guys might be more interested in picking up these books. So by analyzing the short stories in relation to those from the imprint, I also realized it doesn't matter if a story is long, short, or even a novella size length. The short stories we read in class still had a lot of the same things in the other books. You can check out those analyses in the PowerPoint presentation. Approaching all of the readings from the course and the ones from the imprint in a creative manner helped me to visually see where my analysis could be done, and I had more fun arranging the information on a slide than in a well-written scholarly essay. I believe my project suggests that amongst fictional literature is that some themes are more common than others. In almost every book I analyzed, there was a theme of finding new family or friends, finding new identity, grief, being treated as a kid, and most importantly of all, the importance of storytelling and the myths or legends that a culture has. It is possible that within the next year or so, more novels written for middle schoolers or other realms of fiction could expand to really digging into these themes. This literature might also be saying that humanity has gotten a lot rougher for children, and that is why these strong, soul-seeking main characters who deal with moments of grief or fear are important to read about. In terms of my personality, I have been uplifted by doing this project because I see what the authors in Rick Riordan's Imprint are trying to do in the world of fictional magic. I love reading about these characters who struggle through different situations and then rise to the top after figuring out who they are. One of my favorite quotes comes from Kwame Mbalia's Tristan strong punches a hole in the sky. It's the spider web, an old African symbol for creativity and wisdom. It shows how tangled and complicated life can be, but with a little imaginative thinking, we can solve most of our problems and those of others. This is one of my favorite quotes because it takes the spider's web symbol from African culture and states that being creative is what can help us through struggles. If the characters from our stories in class used more creativity, their stories might have been more exciting. Finally, this was a really fun project to do because I got to read and analyze books I've been reading to read anyway, and I was reminded of the stories we read in class. Seeing the similarities and differences between the two groups of stories was also very interesting. I enjoyed putting the puzzle together of what stories from class fit with the setting, conflict, or themes of one of the imprint stories. I hope the message in the presentation is clear and the content is enjoyable to read. One last thing. In Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky, he learns that he is an Anansi Sem, which is a West African storyteller. They can wield magic and create stories like literally out of thin air. And I think after doing this project, I might be more in tune to being one of those storytellers who can wield the creation of stories, or in this case, an analysis of those stories in a non-magical creative way. Okay, so here is a little sneak peek of my PowerPoint. So we have the main page, and then I have the quote from Rick Riordan with the logos in the corners to give this page a little bit of extra color. And then I have a page that says the point of the project, that it's to compare and contrast the settings, conflicts, and themes found in the 3 books I chose from the imprint to stories we've read in class. And it's basically a literary analysis of these 3 things and, compare and contrast. And I put this little blurb here, come join me on a quest, because That's what reading is. It's a quest, and it's really fun. So here are the 3 books: The Dragon Pearl by Yoon Lee, Korean folklore; Shah and the End of Time, Hindu mythology; and Tristan Strong, Punches a Hole in the Sky, which is African American, West African American, depending on how you look at it, legends and stories. So then starting here is where I have all of the compare and contrasting. So I have on the left side is the primary source and things that I found in there related to setting in this slide, and the bolded is the one that, or is the piece of information that reflects the quote. And then we have the story from class on the right, and things that related to setting for this one, and then I have the connection that connect both of them together. So I did that for each one of these. So we have setting first, then we have conflict, then we have themes, and then finally I have a slide that just says, recapping each thing. So we've got the first line of setting, second line conflict, third line themes. And even though fictional stories we've read in class are shorter, there's still, themes that were presented the same way in the larger ones. The larger books from the imprint just had longer times to cultivate them. That's really the main thing. And there's my works cited of all the books I used and the websites. Yep. Alrighty, so that was my creative project presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. Today is November 15th of 2020, so if you want to use this for reference later on, go ahead. Thanks, guys.